Wine Enthusiast magazine, this is the Wine Enthusiast podcast. I'm executive editor Susan Kostrava. Coming up, destinations. We'll sip our way around the globe with wine-fueled stops on 3 different continents. We'll visit Cape Town and meet a sommelier and winemaker on a mission.
I believe wine is about experiences and memories. So if a wine takes me back home, it's taking me to my origin. So my main aim is to make that wine speak an African language.
Plus, we'll get down and dirty with the Mosel Riesling harvest in Germany.
So what you hear here is the music of Riesling. It is the sound of Riesling fermenting.
And after wildfires raged through Northern California last fall, we'll hear about an all-hands-on-deck effort to rebuild wine country.
To use that metaphor, the phoenix rising from the ashes, I think is really fitting. Like, this community is stronger than ever, and we are open for business.
It's coming up on the Wine Enthusiast podcast. Blue Apron wine. Yes, wine. If Blue Apron could make home cooking cool again, why not the Wine Club? Blue Apron only seeks out best-of-breed wines, including Uvaggio, a regular enthusiast editor's choice pick. Most other wine clubs just send you cheap reds and whites dressed up with fanciful labels. Only Blue Apron wine has some of the world's best winemakers working with them exclusively. Get $25 off your first shipment of 6 wines at blueapron.com/corkscrew. When you think of top spots in the United States for irresistible wine, what comes to mind? Washington State, no doubt. Oregon? Then, of course, there's California. Since the mid-1800s, hundreds of wineries have cropped up in California's wine country. The region north of San Francisco is renowned for its lush vineyards and serene atmosphere. So it was all the more shocking when back in October 2017, the news reports were bursting with this.
We begin with the fire disaster unfolding in California tonight. At least 22
destroyed
wildfires.
1,500 homes and commercial buildings.
Closely watching the plumes.
20,000 people to evacuate.
The wildfires that decimated more than 200,000 acres across Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino, Lake, and Solano counties were the deadliest in California history. It took 23 days to contain the fires. Once the smoke cleared, nearly 9,000 structures were burned, and tens of thousands of people were displaced. That's why a group of volunteers from the wine industry are determined to rebuild. They're spearheading a giving fund called Rebuild Wine Country. One of the driving forces behind this effort is Chris Streeter of Senses Wines on the Sonoma coast. Chris is a Sonoma native, and as he recently told contributing editor Virginia Boone, though there's plenty of work still to be done in wine country, the landscape is already showing signs of new growth and recovery.
Given your intense connection to the wine country, personal and professional, let's talk a little bit about, what we all went through this last October with what was called the wine country fires. From your perspective, with Sonoma, all the things that have happened there, let's talk a little bit about, when you first heard about the fires, what was in your mind and in your heart?
It was a crazy, crazy time. I remember talking to my sister Sunday night, the 8th at 10 o'clock at night, and her husband is a firefighter. And she mentioned that her husband, Josh, was away responding to fire. Didn't think anything about it at the time. Went to bed, totally normal night. Woke up Monday morning, like 6 o'clock or so, to a barrage of text messages from friends. And they were asking and just checking in to see if everyone was safe. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm totally fine. Like, I don't know of anything. And that was the moment that I looked at the news and I saw the fires, and there were so many friends who lost their home within 20 minutes at 3 a.m. with no time to leave. And as I heard these stories, I just was in complete shock. And I didn't get anything done that day productively. It was all just checking in and touching base with people. Throughout the week, it was just high alert and realizing that all the systems were failing. News couldn't keep up. No one knew if they were safe or not. Friends weren't sure where other friends were. Families were being displaced every single day. And I think it was that Monday, which was the most devastating. And then going into Tuesday, feeling like, what do we do? How do we help? And that was when we had the conversation at Senses of like, look, guys, there's no central place to put our energy. What can we create? What can we do to help those who really need it?
So was there a particular aha moment, or was it something that just over time, like so much devastation, hearing about so many more stories, realizing all the different things that had been burned down during that night, that first night in particular, did you just have it in your head, like, I have to do something and I have to create it myself? And, where does that come from?
I think it was that Tuesday, after making sure the family and friends were safe, it hit like a rock, like, we need to do something. This is our community, this is our hometown, this is where our roots are. Like, we are Sonoma County. This is everything. It defines so much about us, and it is probably the most defining factor as far as where I've gone in my life and where all three of us have gone in our lives because of the childhood memories. And we wanted to give back. And I think that afternoon, I made a post on Facebook trying to figure out how the heck you give back. And the hardest challenge was figuring out how to do it legally and in a tax-protected manner, because people who donate want to get a tax write-off. Luckily, a friend of mine, Che, who I've grown up with and who's a good friend, he works at Habitat for Humanity of Sonoma County, and he immediately reached out. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is a great opportunity, but we wanted to make sure we had a chance to help all of wine country. And that's when talking to the Census team, and specifically Chelsea Boss, who kind of helped lead the charge and get this thing founded, we decided, let's just go all in and really help as many people as we could. And
Habitat for Humanity was the way to do that, as far as you could tell.
Keep in mind, this is the week the fires hit, and nobody knew what was going on with their close friends or the offices. Most people obviously weren't going to work. And here I am trying to, put together a very relatively difficult entity or effort. And so it's really hard to get those answers. So Habitat for Humanity, and Che in particular, volunteered the information of, Chris, why don't you partner with us? Why don't we focus on the families, not just the community as a whole, but the families who are losing their homes and who are going to have to rebuild? And it just hit. It's like the light went off. Guys, this is it. This is the opportunity. There's Habitat for Humanities across all counties. They can work together closely and take charge and lead the effort for rebuilding.
So how does that partnership work in effect? I mean, you're raising money that goes directly into kind of this entity within Habitat for Humanity?
Habitat collects the funds, reconciles everything, does all the tax reporting, and then redistributes the money to their affiliates as a proportion of homes lost and destroyed by the fires. And it's all earmarked specifically for fire relief. We set up a platform through a website called You Caring. It's 0% fees. They take nothing out of it. We take nothing out of it. We are a 100% volunteer effort, team about 15 to 20 of us.
And then because you don't have any overhead, it sounds like 100% of a donation is going to this effort.
Absolutely. The only money that is taken out of it is if any money is paid through or donated through credit cards, there's a processing fee. But there's almost no way to get around that. So besides that, 100% goes directly to boots on the ground through Habitat for Humanity and the local affiliates. It's going straight to the local affiliates.
And so given that, did you have some goals in mind when you first set this up?
Great question. We humbly thought 50,000 was a great goal. We went live, it was like 5K, 10K or something the first day, and we're like, oh my gosh, like this is actually happening. Through the weekend, I think it hit about 40, and we blasted our email list first thing that Monday, and then there was even more, and we're like, oh my gosh, 50,000 is way too low. Let's raise it to 100,000. And then thanks to the incredible team and the ability to get the word out, the question was, okay, let's look bigger. This is going to take a lot more. We figured out that it was about $100,000 per home for Habitat to rebuild. So we did some basic math, like we need at least 50-ish homes, maybe 100. Repairs were really cheap and only a couple thousand, so we could repair a lot of homes. But if we really wanted to rebuild homes, 50 would require almost $5 million. And so we had the conversation, guys, let's increase this target. Let's set it to $5 million. we have a story, we have a goal that still is just a dent of the total damage, and it's only going to touch a small part of the homes that need to be rebuilt, but it's something that we can look forward to and really create, more momentum behind. So it's gone up quite a bit over time.
So it's been about 3 months since the fires themselves, and it's winter now, and we've actually had little drops of rain here and there. So there's some green, there's some life coming back to the county. What do you see when you drive around wine country now? I mean, specifically Sonoma. What do you see?
It's really important for people to know that wine country is open for business, and wineries are, happy to have visitors. Tourism is such a huge part of the entire industry, and people come into tasting rooms, go to restaurants, you name it. People need to do that. There's no reason not to. I think it's more beautiful than ever, and I know it's hard to look at a place and see a fire go through it, and the destruction that a fire leaves in its path. But when you fast forward just even a couple months afterwards, with fresh rains and sun, and there's already so much new growth. And to use that metaphor, the phoenix rising from the ashes, I think is really fitting. Like, this community is stronger than ever, and we are open for business, and we are looking to host everyone that we can. And I feel it every time I drive through town.
Wine Enthusiast Media is partnering with Rebuild Wine Country to aid communities affected by the wildfires. We'll be donating partial proceeds from our upcoming Wine Star Awards Gala on Monday, January 29th. To learn more about Rebuild Wine Country, visit our website, winemag.com/podcast. And to join the social conversation, follow @WineEnthusiast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and use the hashtag WEStandWithCA. Time for a break, but when we get back,
I get more tourists, and the first question they ask you, are the wines we're drinking tonight all South African? And it really excites me. And they come here with the intention of drinking South African wines.
We'll get a first-hand look at the wine renaissance in Cape Town, one of the top 10 wine getaways from this month's magazine. And
we are filling the barrels that we just washed with fresh Riesling must.
we'll tag along as our contributing editor harvests Riesling from a steep slate slope in Germany. Blue Apron wine. Yes, wine. Awesome wine, in fact. In a head-to-head taste test of several wine clubs, Bloomberg recently wrote, Blue Apron is the clear winner, way more sophisticated in taste. Just as Blue Apron doesn't compromise on the quality of ingredients in their meal boxes, Blue Apron wine only works with incredible vineyards and winemakers, such as Vengi in Napa, Mount Beautiful in New Zealand, and regular enthusiast high scorer Uvaggio. Every amazing wine is just $10 per bottle. Get $25 off your first shipment at blueapron.com/corkscrew. Terms and conditions apply. All orders are handled by Blue Apron Wine, Napa, California. Welcome back to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. I'm Susan Kostrava. Every year, nearly 2 million tourists make their way to Cape Town, South Africa. They go for the breathtaking views of Table Mountain, one of the new 7 wonders of the world. They go for the magnificent beaches and botanic gardens. And more, they go for the wine. South Africa has been making wine since the mid-1600s. Fast forward to today, and South African wine is in the midst of a renaissance. To learn more, Managing Editor and Tasting Director Lauren Buzzio spoke with Tinashe Nyamudoka, head sommelier at Cape Town's Test Kitchen restaurant.
I was born in Zimbabwe, born and bred in Harare. So yeah, I'm a Zimbo by heart, but living in South Africa.
When did you move to Cape Town, and what exactly was it that brought you there?
I moved into Cape Town early 2008. That was just before the chaotic scenes in Harare and Zimbabwe in general, So I took that leap of faith, came down to South Africa for greener pastures.
So I understand that when you moved to Cape Town, you actually knew pretty little, maybe next to nothing about wine. Is that actually true?
Well, look, I grew up in Zimbabwe and there wasn't any wine culture of sorts. And I never grew up with a wine bottle at a dinner table, or let alone taste that much. So I completely knew nothing about wine, just that wine was from grapes and probably you could get red wine and white wine, that's all.
You just competed in the World Blind Wine Tasting Championships this year. So clearly you're doing something right. How did you develop that education?
I got a chance to work in a restaurant as a runner, probably the lowest part in the front of house. So I almost built myself, and fortunate for me, the first restaurant I worked in, the Rounders restaurant, they really ran a good wine program and the owners were really connected in the winelands. I started to grow the proper terms and the proper languages, and the guys there quickly noticed it and they pushed me to learn more. But the major break was when I worked at the One and Only Hotel, which had a much more bigger wine program and a much more developed sommelier team. So I kind of grew my craft there. The wine list was extensive and they put me into school as well. So I spent a bit of time there. Then I moved on to Oyster Box, Umhlanga, Durban, where I was head sommelier there. I even knew more, started to integrate more food, getting into wine competitions, judging here and there. Then obviously I moved to the test kitchen and it opened up pretty much everything,
So how would you describe the wine culture overall in South Africa? I know here in the U.S. there's a good amount of different levels of understanding and education when it comes to South African wine, or even just wine in general, right? It really spans the gamut. But are local consumers there really savvy about the local wines?
I think it has really progressed that much, and people, you'd be surprised. I work in a restaurant, I'm dealing with guests all the time and get to interact with different guests. You still get the diehards who are loyal to the brand and, they stick to what they know. But I think the majority have become much more savvy. They ask the correct questions. They know what they want and they know if it's exciting. I think the big major change has been they're free spirits. They're willing to try something out different. So I think the wine culture has become much more evolved and much more inclusive as well. It used to be an elitist thing, but now I can say for sure African American like myself are more intertwined, getting knowledge, and you're getting sommelier courses around, a lot of wine courses down here. So people are really teaching themselves and learning how to drink what they want.
It must be so gratifying and refreshing to you to be seeing and witnessing those changes and people's willingness to try new things and really, take advice and take advantage of your expertise and those of sommeliers and wine directors in the country to really learn more about something that doesn't need to be intimidating or, as you said, elitist, but really accessible to everybody.
Exactly. And I'm working in a top restaurant where we focus more on the food as well. And generally in places I've worked, you tell them there's food and wine pairing, it's an option. But now, I literally got 90% of my guests coming in, they're willing to trust what I provide because they see what's there, it's exciting, they've never tried it before, or if they've tried other wines, they've never tried the vintage. So they're really much open and so it's very exciting for me.
And from a tourism perspective, are you finding that a lot of people who are visiting Cape Town are also similarly as open to really learning more about the country's wines and trying different varieties that they maybe are not so familiar with or maybe don't have wide experience with?
Definitely, especially in my space, I get more tourists and the first question they ask you, are the wines we're drinking tonight all South African? And for me, it's personally, probably I'd love to be a bit mixed, but for the industry in general and what we're trying to put out there, it really excites me. And, they come here with the intention of drinking South African wines.
So let's talk about one of my favorite grapes and also the most widely planted grape variety in South Africa, which would be Chenin Blanc, a traditional, some would say workhorse variety that was largely used in brandy production, but now more and more producers are actually creating magnificent expressions of high quality from different regions and different even single sites and in such a range of styles. I know you've even started making a wine of your own. Congratulations. And the white being a Chenin Blanc based wine. So tell me, how would you describe the beauty of South African Chenin Blanc and what sets it apart from other global expressions of the variety?
The reason I chose Chenin is it's quite versatile, and I work with Chenin most of the time in the restaurant, and it's a beauty to pair with food. You can have it from different areas, like I said, Swartland, being Stellenbosch, and you're getting cooler sites in the Elgin Valley coming up with beautiful Chenin Blanc. So it's the versatility of the grape and the way you can manipulate it, stylistically. You're getting dry Chenins up to almost sweeter style, noble late harvest. So it gives you lots of texture depending on how it's made. It's quite easy to work around with the farms as well. And I feel it's one grape which can really express all the different regions in South Africa.
Do you think that there are other varieties that you would consider particularly well suited to South African terroir? Certainly one of the, you could say, advantages and disadvantages of South Africa is that there's really quite a diverse winemaking landscape, and it's suitable to a lot of different varieties. But in terms of red cultivars, are there any that you feel really shine, even if it's just within specific regions?
What's really exciting me and what people never talk about is Cape Franc. I am a huge fan of Cape Franc, and I believe it has a place in South African. You can get especially Stellenbosch Cape Franc and some Cape Franc coming from those cooler sites, Botrevier, not as cool, but at least different size, Darling Cape Franc. And it's really expressing that, paints or shavings, that cedar, that lead pencil, giving you beautiful aromatics. So I think Cape Franc is the one to watch in South Africa, and I think we can really be on par with the great Pomerols and stuff. And I'm getting excited with Cinsault as well. It's one that's really, that fruitiness, that lightness, and like Pinot Noir is much more light. And I've been working quite a lot of Cinsault in the restaurant as well, because they've got affinity to pair with food. And the other varieties coming up, people are experimenting. I've been tasting Nero d'Avola from Bosman. Pick of my head, I'd go Cape Franc, Cinsault, and to look out for Nero d'Avola.
We've been hearing a lot in the news about the drought in South Africa. Do you see this affecting not only the upcoming harvest, but also do you think it will affect prices in the industry overall?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the effects already. Maybe even worse in the coming year. You talk to some producers, they've lost almost half of their fruit, half of their production. So I think the downside is obviously prices, but I don't suspect prices on the lower tier and middle tier really having a drastic change. Probably on the higher tier or those technically South African investment grade wines, the Saddies, the Melligneux, they're going to be very hard to come by. So I suspect those prices will really, really shoot up. But quality is going to be definitely high. So we're really excited about that. But on the downside, yes, prices will go and the yields will be low. But hopefully we can ride through it.
So looking forward and looking upward, when it comes to South Africa as a wine producer and as a wine destination, where do you see the future going?
I think it can only get better from now, as long as we're confident of what we're making and we really feel that it's top there with the world. I just think we just need to speak in one voice. It's been waiting for guys like us who speak the language, who've been through the whole wine value chain and understand how our people drink. And I think if we get support from that, I think we'll get more people on board to drink wine and grow the industry.
So let's take a minute to talk about your new wines. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got that started and what was your idea and dream behind developing this brand?
I was looking how my wine journey came about, where my struggles and how I can help, especially people like me coming from a background without drinking wine. And one of the struggles I had in my wine knowledge was, familiarizing myself with the European, terminology, gooseberries, plums, blackberry, blackcurrants. I never grew up eating those stuff, let alone encounter those stuff. I grew up eating in the rural areas in Zimbabwe. I go to my grandfather's house, picking wild fruits. Those are the things I understood. And in the early stages, it was exciting. I was finding the blackcurrants. But when I started to enjoy wine and found out it's not a crime, it's actually allowed to associate any characters and aromas I can associate with my wine, I started to enjoy wine much more better. So I shifted from, describing my wine in a European way. And I want to write wine in an African language and make people like me understand that it's practically correct, to give a reference of what they grew up and what they're familiar to with wine. So for me, the wine brand encapsulates all that, encapsulates my journey through wine from a novice to a prominent, maybe wine advocate. So Kumosha is a Shona name, which means your roots. It can mean your home, or it can mean your wine of origin. I believe wine is about experiences and memories. So if a wine takes me back home, it's taking me to my origin. So I named my wine Kumosha just to give that association. And my main aim is to make that wine speak an African language.
Cape Town is one of Wine Enthusiast's top 10 wine getaways of 2018. To read more about Cape Town and the other 9 destinations on our list, visit winemag.com. For years, contributing editor Anne Kriebel had an itch she needed to scratch. The Master of Wine had worked a number of wine harvests: Nebbiolo and Barbaresco, Pinot Noir in New Zealand and her native Germany, but never before had she harvested one of her all-time favorites, Riesling. That is until last year, when Anne finally got her chance. She brings us this audio postcard.
I've come for the harvest, and the region I'm in is called Mosel Valley, and it gets its name from a river, the River Mosel. So what you can hear is the motor of the monorack. It's a little single rail that goes up steeply. On the back is another harvester. There are buckets and our secateurs. And off we go. Oh my God! This is steep. And this is how the fruit gets down back into the valley. So while the crew is harvesting and the foreman, Christian, then comes and empties our buckets and puts them into boxes, and the boxes get loaded onto the monorail, which goes back down, and then they get tipped into bins, and the bin is on the back of the tractor, and this bin is the bin full of fruit that will go to the winery. The chugging noise you hear is the sound that the crusher makes. One of the bins we've just brought in from the vineyard has been lifted up by forklift and is being tipped as we speak into the crusher. The grapes go in with their stems and they just fall down into another bin. They're being crushed. Right now, the crushed grapes are being tipped into the hopper that, like a large funnel, that is on top of the press, and the press is open, and this is a vertical press. That means it's like a tube, a vertical tube, and inside that is a kind of bag that fills with air and presses the grapes against the side of the press. So that's a really gentle way of pressing, and the press cycle will take about 3 hours to complete. So it's gentle and slow. And here you can already hear the first free-run juice percolating and dripping into the big basin. So this is the press in full swing now, and you can hear how much juice is coming out, and I'm still amazed how cloudy it actually is. But it smells wonderfully fresh and fruity. It almost smells a little bit like green apples. Really, really fresh. We are filling the barrels that we just washed with fresh Riesling must. How simple this really seems, that the grapes just get crushed, then they macerate a little in their own juice, then they get pressed, then the juice settles, and now we're filling this fresh, settled juice into a barrel where it will stay. So what you hear here is the music of Riesling. It is the sound of Riesling fermenting, of lots and lots of airlocks on lots and lots of barrels going at full tilt, blubbing away. So this, what we are hearing now with this airlock and with the carbon dioxide escaping, is just the sort of the high season of fermentation, but then it'll just quieten down and go very, very, very slowly. And of course in winter, the cellar will get colder, so the ferment will slow down. But you just leave these barrels to their own devices and they do their own sweet thing until they're done.
That was Anne Kriebel, contributing editor for Alsace, Austria, and England, working her way through the Riesling harvest in the Mosel Valley. You can see photos from Anne's Riesling harvest on our website, winemag.com/podcast. And now we ask you, is there a wine harvest you'd love to take part in anywhere in the world? If so, we want to hear about it. Send an email to podcast@winemag.com or send us a tweet. Use the hashtag WEPodcast. That's it for today's Wine Enthusiast podcast. We heard from contributing editors Virginie Boone and Anne Kriebel and managing editor Lauren Buzzio. The Wine Enthusiast podcast is produced by Shear & Shim LLC. Our executive producer is Marina Vitage. You can hear a new episode of the Wine Enthusiast podcast every other week. To make sure you don't miss out, subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, write us a review. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. Stay in touch with us by following Wine Enthusiast Magazine on Facebook and Twitter and using the hashtag WEPodcast. And visit our website, winemag.com/podcast. I'm Susan Kostrava. See you next time.